I think it's a smaller, more intimate movie. You know, Scott Lang is a hero who's also a father, and it's a different dynamic for a Marvel movie where his only goal in the movie is to be a part of his daughter's life. I think it's a very relatable goal for a hero in one of these movies, and a very different one. And really, it's about fathers and daughters. I like the intimacy of that story. It's a smaller scale. I also like that when we meet Scott Lang, he doesn't have any superpowers. He's a pretty normal guy. You know, we see him, he's made some terrible decisions, he's coming out of prison, but he's essentially a normal guy just trying to get his life back on track. And then he gets sucked into this much larger Marvel world, a little bit against his will. And I thought that was a whole different arc for a Marvel movie. You know, he's not a brilliant scientist, he's not a multi-millionaire who's designing something, he's just a normal guy. No, why would I hesitate? I was dying to do this movie. I've been wanting to do a superhero movie like this for a long time. I jumped at the chance. No, I didn't feel I needed any advice from Edgar Wright. I read his drafts of the script, and we just sort of built on the drafts from there. I did communicate with him early on, and that was nice. But he had left the movie, and they needed a director, and we sort of built on Edgar and Joe's original drafts, and really kind of expanded the movie from there. The biggest challenge was to get the shrinking right, to make it feel as photorealistic as possible, and really create what would be hopefully the definitive shrinking movie for a generation. To keep them, to really sort of have all these different action sequences, but that each one of them had a different flavor, a different tone. Particularly in the third act, there's a helicopter sequence and a briefcase fight and a backyard barbecue and then into the bedroom. And there's a lot of action, but it all had to feel different and distinct, and also to have a sense of humor to it. It's taken a long time. You know, I think he was one of the lesser known characters. In the comics, he was an original Avenger. So when he didn't show up in the Avengers movie, you know, it was like, oh, where's Ant-Man? As a comic fan, I wanted to see Ant-Man, but they had already been developing a separate Ant-Man movie, so I think that's what took time. I watched all the old shrinking movies. I wanted to sort of remind myself what had been done and then do something different. And on occasion, sort of, you know, a little tip of the hat to some of those earlier shrinking movies. Because there's a long history of those movies, and they're really fun, and there's a really childlike quality to the idea of shrinking down to small sizes. We were able to sort of technologically really advance what those prior movies have done. But I remember seeing Honey, I Shrunk the Kids when it came out. I was like, oh wow, these effects are amazing. And they were at the time, but we had to top all those movies. I loved it. Yeah, I'm someone who has always been a nerd about like visual effects and subscribed to American Cinematographer and Cinefex magazine, and to finally have a chance to do it on a grand scale was terrific. God, I would say Chris Pratt, but Pratt has essentially played Han Solo in Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know. I mean, that's the question. Should they go with an unknown? I mean, Harrison Ford was a relative unknown when the first Star Wars came out, and maybe that's the way to go.